I'm Matthew O'Brien, Vice Chairman of the Town Council and Chairman of the Finance Committee. As elected officials, we all follow the Coventry Town Charter. When it comes to the budget, the Town Charter provides specific instructions and sets out expectations for all of the departments in town, including the Board of Education. Here is the section that deals with departmental budgets. Excerpt from Coventry Town Charter, Section 8, Section 8-4, Departmental Estimates. The town manager shall compile preliminary estimates for the annual budget. The head of each department, office, or agency of the town, including the Board of Education, shall, on or before March 12, file with the town manager on forms prescribed and provided by him a detailed estimate of the expenditures to be made by his department, office, or agency, and the revenue other than tax revenue to be collected thereby in the ensuing fiscal year, and such other information as may be required by the council or the town manager. In order to formulate our budget proposal, the Town Council gathers detailed and specific information from each and every department. We receive the departmental budget requests, the Town Manager's recommendation, and the Town Council uses them to then make our own decisions and changes to each departmental budget. To facilitate our need for detailed information from the Board of Education, the Town Council prepared and presented a list of the information we required by early December, before they began their budget discussions with their own administrators and superintendent. The board says they go through their entire budget line by line. The Town Council asked them to compile the answers to our questions while they deliberate on their own budget request. The information that the Council asks is necessary in order to review the Board of Education's budget request and be able to make an informed decision on a final budget. Given the charter language, the board is required to provide the Town Council with this information. The following video is taken from the March 13, 2017 Town Council meeting with the Board of Education to discuss their budget request. The Town Council asked that the Board of Education provide us with all of the answers to our questions before this meeting. Once again, the Board of Education did not provide the Town Council with the needed and requested information that the Town Charter requires them to provide.
As a group, we came up with a set of questions that we presented to the Board of Education for response. The responses were substandard. What happened to the surplus in 2015 and 2016, how they're going to impact your budget request for 2018, and then you give us a bunch of different directions to go find the information.
Last year's budget, you reported $375,000 surplus in your salary accounts. The year before that, it was 200 and something thousand. In this year's budget, you show a budgeted amount for salaries and then your expected spending, and it's $247,000 less than what you budgeted. So there's something going on in my mind that I should take a look at. I'm not saying there's anything right or wrong, but I would like the information so that I can justify it for myself and then, be comfortable that I'm making some kind of a reasonable decision. We're asking for the information that you're saying has occurred. In other words, since last budget, you say you had more resignations. We'd like to know what they were, and what they were replaced with, how long they were vacant. I mean, there's different things that all impact salaries.
Yeah.
So that's the information that I'm requesting. I would like to be able to justify my own decisions rather than guess.
There's a separately elected board that oversees the education department. I think that the fiscal authority should just look at the fiscal dollars and not worry about what people were swapped.
I don't agree, but then I'm the one making the decision. So.
No, you ask what we think that means that went to the town council. You're a fiscal authority. You look at the fiscal part.
I can't give you details.
14% of our population is special ed.
Services that you were providing to students that were coming in were actually above and beyond what was already budgeted. In other words, if the taxpayers were already paying for those services and then you just provided them with existing resources, then I thought that should go back to the taxpayers. So all you have to do is justify it. So had you done that, then you would have received perhaps as much as $87,000 more, which you obviously spent out of your budget to pay those bills. You reported a $533,000 surplus. If we had added another 87, it would have been $620,000 last year on top of the $200,000 that we reduced your budget.
I think if you looked at the audit, you would not see a $500,000 surplus.
Oh, you gave us the document. And we asked what that was from, and we were told it was all from surplus funds. Monies that were not used for the purposes put in that budget, I'm calling surplus, and that's what it's called in many of your documents and has been called in the past. So that's the amount of money that you reported to us was surplus. You can call it whatever you like.
How can we get answers to the questions.
So in
I
the
mean, it's just
past-
not gonna happen.
in the
To come before the council under this accusatory tone, it's very disturbing, it's very troubling.
Sorry if you feel accusatory, I'm just asking for information.
It's very
If you
accusatory.
go through a
Matt.
budget, if you go
You
through line
sat,
by
Matt,
line.
you sat in on the negotiations with the teachers. You saw the level of detail that we got into with our attorney. I hope that was a snapshot of how we look at everything.
Actually, I believe you do all that, and that's why it should be simple for you to provide us with the data that we're looking for.
Because it takes hours and hours of synthesizing it and working with it in order to understand it. And we're not taking all those hours and rewriting essay questions to answer stuff.
Richard just asked a question, and he's questioning from the number 2 question that was sent. And the question was really very simple. Did you create any new positions? You don't need a report, you don't need a page, you need a yes or no answer. In all this discussion that I just heard in the last 10 minutes, somebody could have said yes or no to that question. But instead, we get all kinds of pile of baloney. Did you or did you not create new positions from last year to this year? That's the question. Yes or no? And it says to look at your item number 1, position tracking, to find that information. On there, you list everything as a replacement, which would tell me that there were nothing new. On the other hand, 14 of them are identified as new. So I don't know whether they're new or they're replacements. I'm looking at what you gave us. Can you explain it to me? So then, if we take it under this assumption that you've just created 14 new positions, now we know that you've got 14 new positions you added in this budget that weren't there last year.
What difference does it make? What difference does it make? What difference does it make if one person left and we hired 2 half-timers, or 1.5 people left and we hired 2.75ers? What difference does it make? I think with 200 people, it's way more complex than that, and the deal is to stay in the budget.
And ours is to set the budget.
So if we sit here and say, we listened to somebody over in the other hall that wanted to reduce it by $1.6 million, which I think is rather ridiculous, but they've given us a number. Now, we're trying to justify that it should be something higher than that. And you're saying, you don't need that information, just make the decision.
I'm here to talk about next year, not this year.
I'm sorry, every budget we go through, we talk about the past performance and the current performance of the budget in order to get an idea of where
I
we're
watched the
going to go.
police one. You didn't talk about what this current year with the police. I watched it.
I disagree.
I watched it. It was not a discussion about how many FTEs they changed and all that stuff.
We
Because
had
We already
that-
have, we already have all that
You already
information.
have that because you run the police. We run the Board of Ed.
So you have the information, but we don't want to give it to us.
Yes.
You just went back and revised 5 years of FTE counts because they weren't accurate at all. There was established 39 new positions in the audit number that was given to us.
That's just the reporting.
Yeah, that's the FTE count. That's the
No,
only
but
one I
that-
got.
28,087,614. We educated 1,591 children. And that comes up to $17,654 a child. There's no denying that. That's what it costs.
What does it
Because it's
matter?
not what goes into it.
What does it matter? to the
Richard, I'm sorry,
taxpayer?
I'm curious, what's your hypothesis here? Do you think we're overspending?
I do.
We're overspending.
I do.
You look at all the state data that's put out there.
I do.
For comparison purposes.
I do.
That Bob and Dave just explained,
I-
we have no control over, which were put together to make comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
Your hypothesis is that Coventry spends too much on students?
We do, in my opinion. We spend 17,000, and I'll
Based
repeat it
on
to you.
your formula.
Based on
Which
just
none of us
backing out.
understand.
You don't understand backing out the magnet school children that you pay
To
zero
what end,
for?
Richard? I don't know.
You pay almost
No, no, no.
nothing.
Let me just
Okay,
finish how it
please.
feels to us. This feels like it's some kind of a criminal investigation. Last year and this year, let me finish, Richard. It's like, the feeling is, like, I know they're overspending, they've got money hidden, and we're gonna find it out. That's the way I feel over the last two budget hearings. It feels like an investigation. I take issue with that. So that's why I take issue under this kind of an atmosphere.
Gene, I understand you were elected. And I understand that you have a problem with us asking the questions. I get that.
It's not asking the questions, Tom, it's the level of minutia and the tone and the attitude. That's
The
what I was
level of
referring to.
minutia. Just wondering if you have new positions isn't a lot of minutia. But, you know, Governor Malloy was also elected, and he has a budget. And we're sitting here as a town council, and if we don't ask questions of Governor Malloy, and we don't ask questions of the Board of Education, we bring to the taxpayers a 16.1% tax increase. Now, if there's anybody in here that thinks that's reasonable and that we shouldn't ask questions, let them stand up and say, I think we need a 16.1% increase here in Coventry. Go ahead. I want to hear the person that wants to say that.
So you don't want us to ask any questions? Is that-
No, Matt, that's not, you know it, that's not what I'm saying.
Gene, the questions that we're looking to get answers for, and you, for some reason, think it's always to cut your budget. Many times, the questions we're asking for is to justify, or to look at and say, hey, maybe they need more in that area. And we can't even get the answers to find out.
Yeah, we could
If
spend
you-
all night.
Please, don't interrupt me. If you look on what happened in this town right after we talked to the police department, and there was a proposal for a new police cruiser to replace a police cruiser that's 7 years old. I would say to anybody, go on to Facebook and look and see what people are saying about replacing a police cruiser that by all police standards, and I've talked to various police departments with officers and supervisory staff at different levels, and every one of them says that it's a no-brainer decision to have that police cruiser replaced. And yet we are getting crucified for even thinking about doing it. And now we're sitting here tonight as a council and we're hearing, you got a lot of nerve to even consider asking us questions and think you're going to get a yes-no answer. We're not going to make reports before we give you a yes-no answer. We're not going to tell you where you got the 14 new people or how many you added. We know that the number of students went down. We added 14 new staff, and we have to tell the public, you're hiring 14 new people with fewer students. I said to you, are these 14 new people? Are these 14 new positions? And the answer was yes. That's why we're asking the questions.
Would you agree that we have people on fixed income in this town that are having problems? And do you agree that we have businesses that could collapse if we gave this type of an increase to them?
Earlier in the night, I passed that sheet across, which was the surplus money and how you spent the surplus money. Could we get an agreement tonight that when you have surplus money this year because the budget is so tight, rather than buy things that were not on the budget, that it comes back to the taxpayers? That when the taxpayers approve your budget, they approve it for the items that are in the budget, and not as an open checkbook to say, hey, go out and buy whatever you want when you have money left over. Maybe we could get that money back to the taxpayers, because we're going to go to the taxpayers this year, and there's a good chance that they're going to see, I almost said a rent increase, they're going to see a tax increase. And the only way we can go and not give them a tax increase is to do severe damage across the board. I would prefer not to do severe damage across the board. I'd like to at least go back to the taxpayers and say, you know, last year they had 600,000 extra. The year before, it was 300,000 extra. And whatever it is next year, instead of spending it on something that wasn't approved, they said they're going to give it back to the taxpayers. I think the taxpayers at least deserve that, particularly in a year as stressful as this.
It's too hard to say and make a commitment one way or the other.
Well, there's items that cost in between tiny and 20,000 that we don't put in here because we don't want to burden the taxpayer with stuff ahead of time. We don't want to add to the budget ahead of time.
Wouldn't it be better to tell the taxpayers that you want to spend it on that?
And if we do that,
And
then
then-
that drives our budget up.
It's not going to change your number though, is it?
Yeah, it is, because
No,
of the
it's
stuff,
not.
yes, it is.
He said it means
You're paying for it in the end of the year anyway. The only difference is you haven't told the taxpayers that that's what you were going to spend it on. You told them you were going to spend it on teachers' salaries, or you told them you were going to
Because that
spend
was
it...
the intention.
Exactly.
And so when it ends up not being spent on that because we have efficiencies.
Then it should go back to the taxpayer.
It is going back to the taxpayer by us spending it on things.
Well, the converse to that is for us to sit here and say, well, looks like they got about $500,000 a year extra. There's there's $500,000 we can cut right before we start. That's what you just said to me.
I'm Matt O'Brien, and I approve this message.